We don't need whistleblowers on this project, Trent said, sliding my termination notice across the desk. My name is Russell Kaine, 46 years old and, until 5 minutes ago, the lead foreman at Driftline Construction's biggest commercial project in Spokane. 23 years in the industry, 16 as a foreman, and this was the first time I'd ever been fired. For doing my job right. I just nodded, took off my hard hat, and placed it on his desk without a word. The site office trailer smelled like coffee and printer toner. Outside, I could hear the excavator working on the foundation expansion. The crews would be moving to steel erection next week, and now I wouldn't be there to make sure it went safely. "You gonna say anything?" Trent asked, leaning back in his chair trying to look casual. But I caught the tight grip he had on his pen. Nervous. New guys always get nervous when they think someone might make a scene. "Nothing to say," I replied, standing up. "I'll clear out my locker." He looked surprised, maybe even disappointed. People like Trent feed on confrontation. They need it to justify the things they do. Take that away, and they're left facing their own choices. "Look, Kaine," he said, voice softening into that fake reasonable tone. "It's not personal. We just have different visions for how to run a tight schedule. You're old school. Very by the book. But deadlines are deadlines." I nodded again. "Got it." Then I turned and walked out. The job site was busy. Framers setting up for the third floor, electricians roughing in the service entrance, concrete guys finishing a pour at the east entrance. Good men, skilled men, men with families who deserved to go home to them every night with all their fingers and full use of their limbs. Men who were working without proper fall protection, alongside unlabeled chemical drums, near unmarked live wires. I cleaned out my locker methodically. Work gloves, extra boots, safety manuals. The pictures of my son's graduation and my daughter's wedding that I'd taped inside the door. 23 years of showing up, doing things right, making sure everyone made it home. And Trent had been on site less than 2 months. As I walked to my truck, Keith from the electrical crew jogged over. "That true? He let you go?" "Yeah." "Because of the safety reports?" I just shrugged, threw my bag in the cab. "That's messed up, Russ," Keith said quietly. "What are you gonna do?" I looked back at the site, at the men working in conditions I knew weren't right, at the corners being cut that would eventually cut someone. Looked at Trent, watching me from the trailer steps. "What I should have done 3 weeks ago," I said. "I started in construction right out of high school, carrying lumber and sweeping floors. Learned framing, then electrical, then project management. Worked my way up honestly. My father was a steel worker who fell 3 stories when I was 12, broke his back. Spent the rest of his life in constant pain because some site manager decided guardrails were slowing things down too much. So when I became foreman, I had one rule above all others. Everyone goes home whole. Driftline hired me 5 years ago to straighten out their safety record after a series of minor accidents threatened their insurance rating. I delivered. Clean sites, proper procedures, training programs that actually stuck. The company's recordable incident rate dropped to nearly 0. Productivity went up, not down. Turns out, people work better when they're not worried about dying. Then the Lewis Creek project came in, $15 million, tight schedule, high profile. And suddenly the company brought in Trent Holloway from their Seattle office to expedite things. First week, he seemed okay. Energetic, ambitious. Called me the safety guru like it was a compliment. But by week 2, the cracks started showing. "Russell, do we really need to inspect every harness daily? Weekly's fine, right? This containment setup is overkill. Just tell the guys to be careful with the chemicals. Can we get the electricians started before the lockout process? We're falling behind." Each time, I'd explain the regulations, the reasons, the risks. Each time, his smile would get tighter, his eyes a little colder. Then I walked into a morning briefing and heard him tell my crew to get it done however you need to, just meet the milestone. I stayed afterward, closed the trailer door. "You can't tell them to ignore procedures," I said evenly. "I didn't," he shot back. "I'm just not micromanaging grown men who know what they're doing. Those procedures keep them alive." He laughed. actually laughed. Come on, Russell. You've been in this business long enough to know how it works. We say all the right things for the client tours and corporate visits, but day to day we do what it takes to hit the schedule. Not on my site. That's the problem. His voice hardened. You think it's your site? After that, I started keeping records. Took photos with my phone. Missing guardrails, improper scaffolding, blocked emergency exits. Made notes of every conversation where he pushed back on safety measures. Documented which regs were being violated. Saved copies of my emailed concerns that went unanswered. My wife Elaine noticed something was wrong. You're quiet lately, she said one night. Just work stuff. Bad? I nodded. Getting there. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning. I arrived early to check the new scaffolding setup on the west wall. Found 3 of our younger guys working 20 feet up with no fall protection. No harnesses, no guardrails, no safety net. Nothing. I shut it down immediately, sent them to get proper equipment. Trent arrived while I was installing temporary railings myself. What the hell, Kaine? Why aren't they working? No fall protection, I said, tightening a bolt. They're getting set up properly now. We're already behind on this section, he said, his voice rising. The client's coming tomorrow. Then we better make sure nobody falls and dies before their visit. He stepped closer, lowered his voice. Look, I get that you've been here a long time. You're comfortable. But the industry is changing. We can't compete if we gold-plate every safety reg. I stopped working and turned to face him. Gold plating? We're talking about basic fall protection, required by law. Required when OSHA's around. He smirked. Come on, Russell. Be reasonable. Something in me went very still. I'd been trying to work with this man, to educate him, to find middle ground. And suddenly I saw the truth. He knew better. He just didn't care. Those are my guys up there, I said quietly. Caleb's got a baby due next month. Luis is putting his kid through college. They trust me to make sure they go home to their families. They're grown men. Their safety is their responsibility. I stared at him, really seeing him for the first time. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Look, he sighed. Just sign off on the inspection so we can keep moving. I'll take responsibility if anything happens. No, you won't, I said flatly. You'll blame them, or me, whoever's convenient. His face changed then, hardened into something ugly. Are you refusing a direct instruction? I'm refusing to falsify a safety inspection. Yes. Then we've got a problem. I nodded slowly. We do. That afternoon, I filed a formal report with our corporate safety officer, documenting all the violations I'd seen over the past month. Attached photos, dates, conversations. By evening, I'd received exactly 0 response. The next morning, I was called into Trent's office and fired. As I drove home, a strange calm settled over me. No more internal conflict, no more trying to work within a broken system. The decision of what to do next was suddenly perfectly clear. I pulled into my driveway and sat there a moment looking at the house Elaine and I had built together. The place where we'd raised our kids, the life we'd made by doing honest work. I picked up my phone and made a call I should have made weeks ago. Occupational Safety and Health Administration, this is Daniel speaking. My name is Russell Kaine, I said. I need to report multiple willful safety violations at a construction site. I can help you with that, sir. Can you tell me the nature of the violations? I've got photos, documentation, dates, names. Everything you need. There was a pause, the sound of typing. Are you current employed at this site, Mr. Kaine? No, I said. I was fired this morning for refusing to falsify safety inspections. I see, Daniel said, his voice sharpening with interest. In that case, let me transfer you to our whistleblower protection division. They'll want to hear this right away. The OSHA investigator, a woman named Paula Henderson, met me at a coffee shop downtown the next morning. She was all business. Crisp pantsuit, recorder on the table between us, notepad already filled with half a page of notes before I'd even sat down. Walk me through the timeline, she said after introductions. I laid it all out. The gradual erosion of safety protocols after Trent arrived. The specific violations I documented. The reports I'd filed internally that went nowhere. The confrontation that led to my termination. "And you have evidence of all this?" she asked. I handed her a flash drive. Every photo dated and tagged with location, daily logs, email exchanges, voice memos from conversations. It's all there. She tucked it into her bag. "This is thorough, Mr. Kaine." "I've been in construction my whole life," I said. "I know what happens when safety gets sacrificed for speed." She nodded, made another note. "We'll review everything and determine next steps. The whistleblower protections mean your former employer can't retaliate." She stopped when she saw my expression. "But they already did." "They fired me before I filed the report," I said. "Different situation." "Not necessarily. The law protects internal safety complaints too. We should discuss a wrongful termination claim." She passed me her card. "In the meantime, we'll be conducting a surprise inspection within the next few days. We may need you to verify certain details." I thanked her and headed home, feeling better than I had in weeks. The system was working like it should. Things would get fixed. Then my phone rang. It was Keith from the electrical crew. "Russ, you need to know something. Trent called an all-hands this morning. Told everyone you were fired for falsifying timesheets, padding hours. Said there's an audit coming." My stomach dropped. "That's a lie. Everyone who knows you figured as much. But he's setting you up, man. Said anyone caught talking to you about company business would be considered part of the fraud. He's trying to isolate any potential witnesses," I said, thinking out loud. "Gets worse. He brought in some corporate guy who gave this whole speech about disgruntled employees and protecting the company's reputation. They're making everyone sign new NDAs." After we hung up, I called Paula Henderson immediately to update her. She listened carefully, then said, "This changes things. They're actively obstructing. We'll move up the inspection." But an hour later she called back, her voice tight with frustration. "We've hit a roadblock. Someone at Driftline filed a counter-complaint alleging you violated company policy by removing confidential documents and photos from the site. They're demanding everything be returned before any inspection can proceed." "That's not how OSHA works," I said. "No, it's not," she agreed. "But they've gotten a sympathetic ear somewhere up the chain. Someone's trying to slow walk this." "So what happens now?" "We fight it, but it'll take time. They're also claiming the site has already addressed any potential safety issues, which means we'd need to establish that violations were present at the time of your complaint." I hung up and sat at my kitchen table, staring at nothing. Trent wasn't just covering his tracks. He was building a case against me, painting me as the problem. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Luis from the site, using friend's phone. They're removing the evidence, replacing scaffolding, adding missing guards, painting lines, working through night. Thought you should know." They were erasing every violation I'd reported. By the time any inspector arrived, the site would look perfectly compliant. Trent wasn't just protecting himself. He was making sure nothing changed, and the men would still be at risk, just more carefully hidden. The next morning I drove to Wildridge Diner, a greasy spoon near the industrial district where a lot of construction crews grabbed breakfast. Sure enough, some of my old team were there. Keith, Luis, and Caleb at a corner booth. They waved me over. "Should you guys be seen with me?" I asked, sliding in. "Might get you in trouble." Keith snorted. "We're off the clock, and they can't fire all of us. They're cleaning up the place like the president's coming," Luis said, leaning forward. "Working round the clock to fix everything you complained about." "So they know exactly what was wrong," I said. "They just didn't care until someone might check." Caleb, the youngest of the group, looked troubled. "That's not all. I overheard Trent on the phone yesterday. He was talking to someone about you, saying they needed to check his work history, find something to discredit him completely." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "They're looking for dirt." "I don't think it's just Trent," Keith said quietly. I think this goes higher, way higher. What do you mean? He glanced around, then pulled out his phone, scrolled to a photo, and passed it to me. It showed an email on someone's computer screen. The subject line read, RE Lewis Creek Project, Schedule Recovery Plan. The body of the email was brief. The board has approved the revised approach. Safety protocols may be adjusted as needed to meet the October completion date. Documentation should reflect full compliance regardless of field conditions. The Lewis Creek model will be implemented company-wide if successful. Bonus structure attached. The sender was Jeffrey Vaughn, Driftline's CEO. Where did you get this? I asked, my mouth dry. Trent left his laptop open when he got called to the site yesterday. I happened to walk by. I stared at the photo, pieces clicking into place. This wasn't just a rogue project manager cutting corners. This was corporate policy, hidden behind a paper trail of fake compliance. They were testing it at Lewis Creek before rolling it out everywhere. October is impossible, I said. That's 2 months ahead of schedule. That's why they brought in Trent, Louise said. He's their hatchet man, gets impossible results by breaking every rule in the book. And blaming someone else when it goes wrong, Keith added. I handed the phone back, thinking hard. Has he done this before? They exchanged glances. There's rumors, Caleb said finally. About a project in Seattle last year. Guy fell, got hurt pretty bad. The foreman took the blame, something about improper training. But word is the real issue was equipment that wasn't up to code. The foreman got blacklisted, Keith added. Couldn't get hired anywhere in the state. Eventually moved east, I think. I pulled out my own phone, made a note of the Seattle project. I need to find that foreman. What are you going to do, Russ? Louise asked. They're covering their tracks. By the time any inspector shows up, the place will look spotless. And they're gunning for you, Caleb added. My cousin works in HR. Said they're building a termination case that'll make it look like you were stealing from the company for years. I looked at these men. Good men who just wanted to do their jobs and go home safe. Men being put at risk by executives who'd never set foot on a scaffolding in their lives. I'm not sure yet, I said slowly. But I know this. What they're doing isn't just wrong, it's criminal. And now I understand it wasn't just Trent. This is the whole company choosing profit over lives. As I drove home, a plan began forming in my mind. I couldn't just expose the violations at Lewis Creek anymore. I needed to expose the entire system. And to do that, I needed more evidence. Evidence they couldn't erase overnight. And I knew exactly where to start looking. Finding Derek Hansen, the former foreman from the Seattle project, wasn't hard. A few calls to old contacts in the industry pointed me to Boise, where he'd finally found work as a basic laborer, a huge step down for someone with 15 years of management experience. He agreed to meet me at a truck stop outside the city. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize him from his LinkedIn photo. The confident, smiling man had been replaced by someone who looked a decade older, with deep lines around his eyes and a permanent wariness in his expression. Appreciate you coming, I said as we settled into a booth. Wasn't sure I would, he admitted. Driftline's not a name I like hearing. I understand. I was a foreman for them until recently. His eyes narrowed. Was. Got fired for raising safety concerns. Sound familiar? The look that crossed his face told me everything. Let me guess, he said bitterly. Trent Holloway? I nodded. Same playbook, different victim. He stared into his coffee. They'll destroy you, you know, like they did me. By the time they're done, you'll be unhireable. A thief, a liar, maybe even criminally negligent. Only if I let them, I said. I'm fighting back, and I could use your help. He laughed without humor. What can I do? I tried filing complaints, tried going to the press. Nobody cared. One guy gets hurt, it's a statistic. And Driftline has very good lawyers. But it wasn't just one guy, was it? I pushed gently. It wasn't just your project. He was quiet for a long moment. No, he finally said. It wasn't. Over the next hour, Derek told me everything. How Trent had been brought in to accelerate their project too. How safety violations became routine. How Derek's reports were ignored or lost. How when Jack Tremaine fell from faulty scaffolding, Trent had already prepared paperwork showing Derek had approved it despite known defects. "I never signed that inspection," Derek insisted. "They forged my signature. But by the time I could prove it, I was already fired, already blamed. Jack's family sued me personally, not the company." "Did you keep records?" I asked. "Photos, emails, anything?" "Some." He hesitated. "After everything fell apart, I was so focused on surviving that I just walked away. But I kept a backup of everything. Never did anything with it. Would you be willing to share it with me? Combine it with what I've got?" He studied me. "To what end?" "OSHA's a joke. They're underfunded and outgunned. The press doesn't care until someone dies, and Driftline has friends in high places." "I'm not going to any of those places," I said. "I'm thinking bigger. If this is happening at multiple sites with the same playbook, the same people involved." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're talking about a pattern, a corporate conspiracy." I nodded. "Federal workplace safety violations are criminal offenses if they're willful and repeated. With enough evidence, this goes beyond fines. People go to jail. The FBI? Department of Labor has its own investigation division, and they work with the Justice Department on criminal cases." For the first time, I saw a spark of hope in his face. "You really think you can make it stick?" "Not alone," I said. "I need your evidence, and I need you to go on record." He was quiet for a long moment. "They took everything from me," he finally said. "My career, my reputation, my retirement. Jack nearly lost his life." His jaw tightened. "What do you need me to do?" For the next week, I worked around the clock. I combined my documentation with Derek's, creating a comprehensive case file showing the pattern across multiple projects. I reached out to other former Driftline employees through industry forums and social media groups. Found 3 more foremen with similar stories from other states. Meanwhile, I kept getting updates from my old crew about the Lewis Creek site. The hasty safety improvements were for show only. As soon as Trent thought the heat was off, corners started getting cut again. Men were still at risk. On Friday morning, 10 days after I was fired, I walked into the Department of Labor office in Spokane with a thumb drive, a stack of printed documentation, and Derek Hansen at my side. By afternoon, the wheels were in motion. Monday morning, 7:15 a.m. I parked across from the Lewis Creek site and waited. The timing had to be perfect. At 7:30, crews were gathered for the daily briefing. Trent stood on a makeshift platform, clipboard in hand, looking confident, probably telling them to push harder, move faster. At 7:42, exactly as planned, 3 black SUVs pulled up to the site entrance. 8 people in windbreakers emblazoned with DOL OIG on the back, Department of Labor, Office of Inspector General. The federal investigators who handle criminal workplace safety violations. 2 local police cruisers arrived seconds later. I watched through binoculars as they approached the security gate, showed credentials, and moved in. One team headed straight for the site office, another spread out across the site, cameras and tablets in hand. Trent saw them coming and froze mid-sentence. Even from a distance, I could see the blood drain from his face. He recovered quickly, plastered on a smile, and stepped forward to intercept them. The lead investigator, a woman I'd spoken with several times over the past week, didn't even slow down. She handed him a document, the federal inspection warrant, and walked right past him toward the office. 2 investigators peeled off and approached the workers, who had stopped to watch the commotion. They started taking statements right there on the spot, documenting everything before anyone could be coached or threatened. Through my binoculars, I saw Keith point to the northwest scaffolding, where I knew the guardrails were still missing despite being marked as complete in the safety logs. Another investigator was taking photos of the electrical panel I'd documented as improperly grounded. The site was shut down within 30 minutes. At 9:17, Trent was escorted to one of the SUVs, his face ashen. Not under arrest, not yet, but taken for formal questioning. 2 hours later, investigators led Jeffrey Vaughn himself through the site, pointing out each violation, each falsified record, each piece of evidence that matched exactly what I'd provided. I didn't need to stick around for what came next. The system was finally working the way it should. 3 months later, I sat in a conference room at Zentren Global, reviewing safety protocols for their new mixed-use development downtown. As their newly hired safety director, I had authority to approve or reject any construction practice across all their projects nationwide. My phone buzzed with a news alert. I allowed myself a small smile as I read the headline, "Construction Executives Indicted on Federal Charges for Willful Safety Violations." The article detailed how Driftline Construction's CEO, COO, and 3 project managers, including Trent Holloway, faced criminal charges for conspiracy to violate workplace safety laws, falsification of records, and obstruction of justice. If convicted, they were looking at substantial fines and up to 5 years in federal prison. The company itself had been barred from bidding on government contracts for 10 years. Derek Hansen had been fully exonerated. The settlement from his wrongful termination lawsuit would fund his retirement. More importantly, he'd gotten his reputation back. My phone rang. Luis, now working as a foreman under me at Zentren. "You see the news?" he asked without preamble. "Just now. They're saying the Lewis Creek building might get condemned. Too many structural issues from rushed work." There was satisfaction in his voice. "Karma's a beautiful thing. So is doing the job right the first time," I said. After we hung up, I walked to the window overlooking my new project site. Workers in proper safety gear moved with confidence across a well-organized site. Every guardrail in place, every harness inspected, every worker properly trained. No one would fall on my watch. No corners would be cut. No one would choose profits over lives. I didn't need to see Trent in handcuffs to know I'd won. The proof was right in front of me. Men doing honest work, knowing they'd go home safe tonight. That was all the victory I needed.